Ron asked me to be a part of this panel, and then he came back and said I would be the moderator as well. So real quickly, we're going to go down the line and just have everybody do brief introductions, and then we're just going to talk a little bit about big ideas that each of us have for the region, just some thoughts. So I'm Paul Green, Kentucky Valley Education Cooperative, but I always tell everybody I'm a lifelong educator, and you know, my probably what I am more than anything else is a history teacher. So I always like to come back to being, you know, historically, you know, how do we look at what has happened in the past and how do we move our region forward? So, you know, that's what I really want to do is find out how do we move our region forward. So, Tom.
Okay. My name is Tom Eblin. I'm a columnist at the Lexington Herald Leader, former managing editor, and Lexington native. A lot of my ancestors, I passed through Breathitt County where they settled 200 years ago. I've got a lot of family in eastern Kentucky, and I've always been interested in the region. I'm pleased to be here today.
Hi, I'm Taylor Williams. I'm a senior at Hazard High School, and from the perspective of a student, I'm interested in staying here for the rest of my life and seek to advance Eastern Kentucky through my career, so I'm happy to be here today.
I'm Bruce Parsons. I'm from Pikeville, Kentucky. I've worked for the last couple years with KVEC in developing the Holler, which is a place-based online learning platform that we'll talk about more today. But very dedicated to being in this region and working in this region and doing all I can with digital technology.
I am Natasha Watts, and I am the Visual Communications Instructor and Program Coordinator here at Hazard Community and Technical College. I grew up in a little town called Blackie, which is located in Letcher County. We always go by the Blue Bridge. And so I'm from the region, I teach in the region, and so my passion lies in giving students a toolkit that will get them employment and also make them happy to stay here.
So I'm going to start out with my history lesson. So when we first, if you go back years ago in the formation of our country and we talked about the economy of the United States, everybody that was in the United States, in order to be productive citizenry, you were a skilled laborer. You had to be very skilled in lots of different areas. But if I needed a piece of furniture, I would go to a local furniture maker and I would tell them I need a chair, and that furniture maker had to have the skill set to completely put all that together. As we move forward, we get to a point in time where through technology, the world changed. And through the division of labor, and we took this chair and we broke it apart and we made it into lots of these little pieces. And the level of skill needed to, you know, put this thing together was very minimal. And so, you know, we had a long period of time in American history where skilled labor, you didn't really need to have a lot of skill. You work in a factory, they would line up outside. I need a worker to replace somebody. I would just go out, pick somebody off the street. They would come in, I'd show them, okay, you need to do this task one time, and you're hired, and now you go, and we can produce. Well, we are now transforming back, and we are now in a time period where that the age of unskilled labor is past us. Today, with technology and automation has replaced the need for that unskilled labor. What that person could do, that menial task over and over and over again, 100 times a day, 1,000 times a day, now there's a robot that does that, or there is some type of automated structure that does that. So we have to look at what we're doing in all facets of how do we prepare our society for this new skilled age where we have to have these skills. Now, what we have to think about is right now we're in the middle of this curve. This curve is occurring. And so what we've got to do is we've got to find ways, how do we see around this curve? So for today, what we've tried to do is we're trying to have lots of sessions in which we want people to really think about big ideas and seeing around this curve in the road, what's out there. There is a very big bright spot to this, though. There was 2 years ago, I think it's 2013, there was an Oxford study that said in about the next 20 to 25 years, 49% of all existing jobs that are available today, every job that's out there today, 49% of those jobs will be gone. Okay? Now, that's the case if you live in Lexington, Louisville, New York City, anywhere you live. 49% of the jobs that's out there, they're going to be gone. They're going to be replaced by automation, by computerization, by technology, all these different things. The bright spot to this is that we know that the world is changing and we're in this curve. What we have to do is we have to get out in front of this curve. We have to start today and a year ago seeing around this curve in the road. And we have to start preparing our communities, our schools, everything we do in order to be ready for that new world. I went to a meeting a couple weeks ago and they were talking about robots. And they said, you know, what in 10 years, what's going to be one of the biggest jobs there is? A robot repair person. You know, because if we're going to have all this automation and we're going to have all this robotics, somebody's going to have to repair these things. You know, we have to have people that understand these STEM technologies. The advanced manufacturing, the personalization. People no longer want that chair that there's 5,000 of the same. Everybody in today, I want unique. I want to design my own. I want to be able to go online and be able to draw it and then be able to push print and it go somewhere and it be developed in some way. So, you know, for my big ideas today, I just hope everybody in the audience today will be able to go to a session and you will come up with something. You will see something that I think Secretary Heiner talked about, that specialization. This is the niche. This is what we can do in our community, our school, and we think that if we focus on this, we can make this work for us. We can see around that curve in the road and we can change the trajectory of our region.
Very good. Before I moved back to Kentucky to be managing editor of the Herald Leader, which I did for 10 years, I was the business editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for about 6 years and a business journalist before that. So you might ask, you know, what's a columnist from Lexington down here to try to give us some ideas? One of the things that journalists do is meet people, look at what works, look at what doesn't work. And one of the things, since I returned to writing, that I've tried to do with my column is to look at the people in Kentucky, especially the entrepreneurs who are doing really exciting, innovative things that have, you know, big potential for the future. And one of the things I learned from being a manager for 20 years is the way you help people succeed is to push them toward their strengths and away from their weaknesses. And so that's, you know, really important for a region like Eastern Kentucky that is trying to reinvent itself is, what are our strengths? You know, there have been great strides made in recent years in education and technology and entrepreneurship. There are a lot of long-time success stories, some of which are in the room here, like Kentucky Highlands Investment Corporation, some great ideas from Mesa. And it's a matter of bringing all that together to really find the ideas that are going to be the future. There's an old saying that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is today. So, you know, we've seen a lot of efforts over the last, you know, decades that are starting to pay off. And I think the key now, with the economy changing, with the decline of coal jobs and the rise of technology, presents a real opportunity for places like Eastern Kentucky. You know, technology is in many ways a great leveler for people who have education and ability to take it on. You know, that it gives the potential that Eastern Kentucky is no longer, you know, isolated in the mountains. It's in the center of the country. With proper investment in infrastructure, proper education, and primarily, you know, proper inspiration for future entrepreneurs, I think a region like this can look and say, what are our strengths? You know, we have natural beauty, we have a rich culture, we have that central location. We have a lot of really smart, good people who want to succeed, and they want to succeed here. And so I think if you give them those tools and give them those ideas and then have public-private partnerships to help those ideas, you know, take hold, you're going to succeed. You know, one of the things that I've always in recent years found most interesting is with aerospace and advanced manufacturing being a really strong Kentucky industry. One of the most innovative things going on is at Morehead State, where they become real pioneers in miniature space satellites. You would think, how on earth would something like that happen? Well, it was, a good idea, a place where that idea took root. But, it's not a surprise, and I always kind of go back to one of my family stories, is, space science is not new for Eastern Kentuckians. My aunt married a man in the 1950s who grew up in Prestonsburg, where he was from, got an engineering degree from UK, but he ended up moving to California, went to work for a company called Rocketdyne, and when Apollo 11 lifted off the moon after the first men set foot on the moon, he helped design that engine. So there's nothing new about Eastern Kentuckians being able to succeed. What's new now, though, is that there's a unique opportunity with the right ideas, the right investment, to have them succeed here and to lift up the whole region and not have to go outside.
Okay, so I mentioned before that I'm a senior in high school. So I'm at the end of my secondary education career, but a lot has changed during the time that I've been in school. So during my career as a student, there's been changes to our area, our economy, our education that we can all visibly see every single day, no matter where you are, what you're working, anything like that. But the unique thing that Secretary Heiner referenced about this region is that despite the changes, where they come from, and how they affect us in one moment, we love this area, and people in southeastern Kentucky and Appalachia more broadly want to see the area thrive and want to have a stake in that. So that's really encouraging to see that in the past and in the future, we are not letting any change that has occurred stop us from wanting to continue to make advancements in this area. So I'm going to talk specifically about technology and how that's played a role in education. So my generation started school, and in all of our kindergarten classrooms, we had an overhead projector. In 4th grade, one teacher got a smart board. In 6th grade, our math teacher still had an overhead projector, but she had a document camera, and we thought that that was the coolest thing ever. So as we've gone on, we've seen more of the advancements come into play, specifically with KVEC and the Race to the Top grant that was mentioned before. So there are multiple teachers in our high school with Mondo pads. Several of our classrooms do have smart boards. So the technological advancements, while they seem trivial maybe to somebody that's not exposed to education every day, have made a huge difference. Last year in our AP Calculus class, we achieved something that hadn't ever been accomplished in our school. So because of the fact that we had greater access to technology, we could embrace a very technologically focused teaching approach. It kept all of the students engaged in class every day. We had access to resources from the College Board to prepare directly for the AP exam throughout the year. Out of a class of 15 students, we had 10 that received college credit for that high school class. So it wasn't necessarily a dual credit class, but that's a credit that transferred to several colleges for the seniors that graduated, and hopefully will transfer also for the juniors that were in that class, so that will put us a step ahead whenever we enter a true secondary education. Specifically in my school, I've been mentioning technology, but we've used that to focus on developing entrepreneurial skills for students. So our Student Technology Leadership Program has developed and grown over the past 3 years a project that we call Photo Effects. So we got a grant to purchase a photo printer. We have students that take pictures of this region because we do love it here in the mountains. We love to showcase that beauty. So we take pictures of specifically Appalachia. We print them in our school, and we students travel and sell those pictures to sustain that project. And we've even implemented community service into that with trying to give back to our homeless shelter and make further economic developments for the community, and not just teaching our students how to develop these skills for themselves, but how we can give back to the community at the same time and make the workforce that we are entering even more economically developed. So given that specific example, as well as many other demonstrations of student leadership and entrepreneurial skills in this region, that clearly shows that technological developments and investments in education are breeding creativity and developing skills for professional careers in our students today. So in the future, this will be even more evident and advantageous to Kentucky as a whole, and specifically this region, than we can possibly realize or explain now. So my generation does have big ideas for all of Appalachia. Community organizations today are teaming with youth involvement. Envision Hazard here is a downtown revitalization effort, and there are several of our classmates, myself included, that we regularly attend those meetings, and we are holding a stake in the development of Hazard, and specifically our Main Street downtown community, because we want this community to thrive. So the future of our area is extremely bright because we are invested in our education here and in the future of this area as we seek to come back. Whether a student wants to be a doctor, a lawyer, an educator, a legislator, a business owner, we want to change dramatically the statistics of the past and make the future bright for Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia. So K-12 students here are passionate, we are determined, we are optimistic. The changes that take place whenever the next generation of students is in school and you have another high school senior that's reflecting on her educational career from kindergarten to the 12th grade, the changes will all be positive, from the area to the economy to the educational career. Communities in Appalachia will be collaborating. They will be seeing positive economic development on every platform as we continue to work together and bring together the ideas of all of you and the students like myself that are holding a stake in this. So thanks to the past, present, and future work of KVEC, of educators, and of our community members that motivate and include our youth, we have every capacity to change this region forever. The ideas that youth have, they begin going into place today, and they're going to continue into the future for the sake of the region that we love. So thank you all.
Follow that, Bruce.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've got to go now. That's all so absolutely fantastic to hear, and it just sort of, reiterates and makes me feel great about what's happening in our schools and what's happening in our region, and it sort of makes me think a lot about the foundations of the Holler and what will become this place-based network that we're trying to build. I spent a lot of time early on working in classrooms, working with young people, working with students, and anytime you would get a collective of those folks together, it always started, a conversation would start that I want to make, a film, but I don't know what to do next. I want to make a comic. I want to make some sort of digital product, something with a Raspberry Pi. I want to sort of engage in this activity, but I don't know what that next step is. And these are young people in our region who want to be game designers, who want to be programmers, who want to work in a number of different fields. And we work very hard to help them, one day you're going to be able to do this, or one day this is what you hope to achieve. And I think really what our focus with the Holler has been able to do is to answer, not necessarily what you're going to do down the road, but what you can do today and what you can do tomorrow, so that we can connect those things together. Through the Race to the Top grant and through KVEC, we've had a lot of folks who've taken a lot of interest and engaged in the Holler. We've been able to grow over the last 2 years to a weekly registered user count of more than 3,000 users. So those are more than 3,000 people who are engaging in the conversation on a weekly basis. Our annual readership has become over 60,000. So that's how many people are tuning in to listen to what that conversation is. And the number one driver of traffic for our network has been student work. It far and away over any other sort of press release or thing we're able to create, the student work, and some of those students are in here today, have been able to drive that conversation. And I think we really are able to talk about what we do today and what we do tomorrow. One of the things through our Holler studio and the equipment we're able to access that we've really worked hard on is demystifying the sort of entry process into new ideas. We had some students who were very interested in comic creation and cartooning and animation, and Christopher Epling, who's here today, helped really pioneer, along with Kelly Thompson, and their art workshop piece. It was the first real success on the Holler, and at the time of their project, which helped kids around here create visual stories, they had 127 members in this sort of sub-community on the site, and those 127 members were accounting for 70% of the traffic. It was constant conversation, constant sharing, and it was really fantastic, and it helped sort of set the trend for what we do. We also heard a lot of students who wanted to get into programming with Raspberry Pi, or they were learning to computer science and learning to program, but they didn't know what sort of a tactile, something you could hold in your hand solution would be for that. So we spent a week in our studio creating a Game Boy from scratch from Raspberry Pi using open source software. And this was something that we had never done before. I had never soldered anything in my entire life. And in 20 minutes, I burned off all my fingerprints, and then we figured out how to do it. And so we didn't do this as a finished, polished YouTube video. We did it live on air on twitch.tv and just made mistakes in real time and let people see that process to really demystify the entry, that it doesn't have to be perfect. The process often is more important than the final piece. And so we really try to drive that message as much as we can. And then over the last year, just the growth in student work that's happening on the Holler. It used to be we had 1 or 2 every now and again, and now we have a lineup for the next year of almost weekly student work that's going to be populated. And I think that's the most important thing. And for me, developing this platform, the most exciting part and the scariest part is that there is no concrete vision of what this thing is going to be. We're sort of very adamant that it be malleable and it grow and evolve as it needs to and not be set in any one sort of ideology. So that's incredibly exciting. As a developer, it's also completely terrifying. But we really look forward to see what people create and where it sort of goes from there.
Okay. Well, I guess I get to be last around this up. That's difficult. So I guess I'll lead with saying I'm addicted to education. And I wasn't always addicted to education. As a matter of fact, I don't think that there's one professor I ever had that would probably point me out and remember me. But it began for me, we watched the video when we started, and a program much like what we saw in this video gave students in my school the opportunity to do video production one summer. And that was back in the year 2000 when the very first digital editors rolled out for Macintosh. And I was always, and still today, I'm a mid-range student. I like to get my work done and just get out. I'm not looking to get an A, I'm looking to get the C to the B range. And I'll never forget, one student asked me a couple weeks ago, why do you do this? It was the first time I felt really smart. Like it was the first time in the room I knew who I was because I could work that computer system. Now, up to date, I had never touched a computer system like that. I'd only ever seen a Dell that was in our school library, and it worked at okay speed. And that, I mean, it just flipped everything I knew. Like here was this fancy piece of technology. I was in my hometown of Whitesburg. I grew up in Blackie. I went to high school and graduated with 40 people, and I was working on one of the best editors that was on the market. I mean, I was just blown away, and I knew how to work it. That was like the thing to me that just blew me away, that I could work it. And I was showing my teachers how to work it. And that started my addiction to this like learning of these different fields and what I could do with it. And so I went on to broadcasting at a university in the state, and I love that. And then not long after that, I was leading some media programs, and I was like, you know what? I would like to teach at a community college. And that sprung from one semester. I couldn't hack it at this public university. I think a lot of our students, especially in a community college setting, they come with a lot of baggage. They're not showing up to your class just wanting to learn. They have all this stuff with them. And just like in a K through 12 setting, we sometimes get stuck with how to figure that out in our classroom settings. And I know he doesn't remember me, Mr. Ron Reed, I think he's in the back, but I'll never forget sitting in his English class. We were circled around and we were discussing some classical literature. Now I'm a terrible reader. I can do images great, but I thought, this is what it's about. Like I can do this thing, there's this space where I can do it. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna teach at community college level. I wanna teach here in a community college because the community college has such a special bag of students that you find nowhere else. You don't find that at a university. You know, your university, you have your typical students. And so from that point on, I decided I'm gonna go get a degree in education. Well, K through 12 people don't like people who don't have bachelor's in K through 12. So it took me a while, but I landed a career in technical education. And so I had come from a primarily arts-based world, and now I was in this career in tech ed world. And it was it really threw me for a loop, because it was like, how do you train these people to get out in that world and start working quickly? But it gave me a real schooling of what I needed to do. And so after that, I immediately started looking. I knew I needed to get a doctoral degree, and so that's where I'm kind of at right now. But I'm in that addiction stage. And so when I say visual communications, people are always like, well, what is that? Well, what I teach at Hazard Community is we have a video production track, a multimedia track, and a web page design track. Now, you can do AAS and all this and that. But what my students are is, when we think about this tech boom, a lot of people like to throw around the word coding, code language. We need to learn this language. I think that's amazing, but that only fits a certain sector of students. What our program does is, when you get someone who can code, they're not always good designers. They can't build your content on your website. They can't take your photos. They can't edit them. They can't build what people are seeing in front of them. They're on the back end making it work. They're able to produce those RSS feeds, and they're able to get things going. So the visual communications program, that's what we do. And so when we think about this new economy, we have to think about a toolkit. We have to think about, what can we arm people with that will get them a lot of things. And, for instance, we have people in the welding program who will take one of my web page design courses. And they do that because they will have a 9-to-5 job, but they will pick up work on the side doing welding for people, and they want to build a website so people can come and see what kind of work they can do. And so it's really about building, to me, this toolkit of things that will take them forward. And that's how I think about it. And I think about it as well as, when you grow up here, I think people, when you're in a culturally rich place, I think you look at the world a little more dimensionally than you would if you're not in such a culturally rich place. So I think that we have a really great array of students who see things differently. And I also think they're really gritty. And grit's been a new term that was kind of popularized by Angela Duckworth, who was got a MacArthur Genius Grant not long ago, wrote a book, did a TED podcast. But if our students make it, it's because they're the grittiest of the grittiest. And the ones who really do well, they don't just show up to your class and, they had a hard time in math class in high school. They show up to your class and they have been through things that you can't even imagine happen to them. And they're there, and they're on time. And that is grit, and that shows success to me. And so I think, for me, when I envision the future and why I'm in the role I'm in, is I think that our students have a toolkit that they can build that will take them forward, that will get them that 9-to-5 job running their welding truck, but will also allow them to do a hustle on the side where they're doing separate welding jobs. It's like I had a student 2 semesters ago say, I want to be a math teacher. He's one of the brightest students I have ever met. He was doing electricity work for his uncle. And he would work almost 40 hours in a weekend, show up to my class on Tuesday. And this was an intro. I also teach computer information courses. This was an intro to computer information. And he was like, but I want to be a math teacher. And I was like, well, why don't you be that math teacher and do your electrical work on the side, in between? And he was like, well, I hadn't really thought about that. He said, but everyone discourages me from being a math teacher. And I was like, wow, I think you'd be a brilliant math teacher. I'm not sure where he's at, but it was just a real awakening that sometimes we don't see our student, we see them as one stream, we don't see them as multiple. And these students, a lot of times, they have multiple talents. And so for me, envisioning the future, I just think we have to think about this toolkit of what can we build for our students and where can they go with it.
So it looks like we've got about 5 minutes left with this group. We have a microphone set up here in the center of the room. If anybody in the room has a question for any of the panelists, feel free to just come forward. And I do have a question. Bruce, you talked a lot about the holler, but I know that this is a very large and different audience than maybe, so can you tell everybody and go back maybe and talk about what exactly the holler is?
Sure. So it's a network of sites where we have a lot of sub-communities. Instead of calling them groups, we call them hollers. And so you might have a holler that's about, trial and error with digital technology and Raspberry Pis. You have one that's about learning how to create a comic book or learning how to engage in lots of different ways. And then there are a lot of hollers that are sort of educator-based. So you look at best practices in the classroom, what lessons are working for you, what's not. And so it's an open platform where anyone can join and then take part in that conversation.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone for this group? Yes, go ahead.
So with the advent of broadband as it comes to our region, is there any reason why students coming of age here and getting their education here can't compete in even some of the more advanced technological innovations that are going to fuel the economy, not just in Kentucky, but more broadly? Are we prepared to offer that over the next few years?
I mean, from my perspective, I feel like we're working that direction. I think what the broadband brings us, like right now, when you talk to students in the region about doing digital work, it's always a question of broadband and what the access is going to be. In our studio space, when students come in, like we have, really fantastic equipment. But the thing that's always most impressive for the students is how fast the internet speed is compared to what they have at home. And so I think with the access that we hope to be able to provide in that route, the students can stop thinking about access to broadband, that it becomes an afterthought. So what they're focusing on is what the idea they really want to pursue or what they want to learn, and they don't have to think about the access at all. And I think that's the biggest sort of attribute to building that network.
And one other point, and I think the next panel may actually have a lot of conversation about that, but we're working very hard to align K-12 and some of our initiatives around, futuring out, but also some of the great programs that's going on in some of our post-secondary institutions. And that's one of the reasons why, and I kind of foreshadowing a little bit our next group with Dr. Landon and the EKU and their game development program and esports at UPOC and some of those things. So there's some exciting things that are occurring in this region that really aren't, Ron mentions it's not happening anywhere else in the United States. It truly is not happening anywhere else in the United States. And so, yeah, I think that we are moving in that direction. Are we there? No. But I don't think anybody is. That we're in this curve. And so I don't think that anybody knows exactly where we're going. We're just trying to prepare. Any more questions? If not, I want to thank our panelists. Panelists, do y'all have any final remarks? Anyone? If not, I want to thank our panelists for this session and